Hi, and good evening, everyone. It is so wonderful to have you here. My name is Crystal Marks. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Executive Director of Seattle Out and Proud, or as you likely know us, Seattle Pride. And welcome to the first ever, so exciting, Pride Speaks event. This is our speaker series where we address tons of issues that impact our LGBTQIA plus community in everyday ways and some extraordinary ways, but we are addressing them to make sure that we aren't left out of the conversation. And so obviously tonight, we are addressing how our community shows up in homelessness and what the homelessness response is in the Seattle-King County area that pertains to the LGBTQIA plus community. I want to tell you a little bit about Seattle Pride before we jump into our programming tonight. We have a fantastic moderator and amazing speakers on this panel for you. But a little about Seattle Pride. We are a 501c4 organization, so we're a nonprofit, but we get to do a little bit of political advocacy as well. We have been around for a long time, and if you've ever attended the Seattle Pride Parade, that's us. Well, we do a lot more than that, obviously. We are here putting on programs for you during the quarantine period. We're doing these year-round, as well as virtual Pride in June, maybe something else a little bit later in the year, and a bunch of other things to keep you engaged. We also have the Seattle Pride magazine that comes out quarterly in over 850 locations throughout King County, and it's free, as well as online on our website, seattlepride.org. While you're at our website, if you've enjoyed this content tonight, which I know you will, the panel, the Q&A afterwards, and the opportunity to network, we hope that while you're on our website, you'll also go to our donate page. We put on these programs free of charge for everyone so that everyone can see it. We would love if you would support it by making a donation that goes towards us being able to continue to put these on for you. So let's get started. I would love to tell you about our fantastic moderator. Our moderator this evening is Tracey Leong. She uses she, her pronouns. Tracey is an anchor with KIRO 7 Morning News. She joined the team in October of 2019 alongside veteran morning news anchor Michelle Millman, meteorologist Nick Allard, and traffic reporter Tracey Taylor. Tracey began her journalism career in Humboldt County, California, where she worked as a multimedia reporter, producer, weather forecaster, and an anchor at KIEM TV. She stayed in Northern California for her next stop in Redding as a multimedia reporter and evening anchor at KRCR TV. Tracey then moved across the country to WJZ-TV in Baltimore, Maryland, that's where I was born, to work as a general assignment reporter and morning anchor. Most recently, she worked in Los Angeles at Fox 11 KTTV as a general assignment reporter. Born and raised in Southern California, Tracey is a proud graduate of Cal Poly Pomona, and during college, she was an intern for Late Night with Conan O'Brien in New York and also taught English in China. When Tracey is not at work, she volunteers to help rescue animals, increase awareness against animal abuse, and promote healthy heart initiatives. She enjoys exploring the outdoors, hiking, stand-up paddleboarding, snowboarding, and biking, and is thrilled to discover the many activities and adventures available to her in the Northwest. Tracey also loves spending time with her adventurous dog, Bella. Tracey's our fantastic modelist and a moderator, and I look forward to bringing her on to you now.
I'm very excited to be here. This is, we're kicking off the series. We have a great team of speakers to start us off tonight. So let's go ahead and introduce the panelists who will be answering some very important questions tonight. Alain Chan, who uses the pronouns they, them, is a clinical supervisor at the Downtown Emergency Service Center, DESC. They oversee the community outreach and advocacy team, COAT, which works with people who've had their mental health competency raised in the criminal justice system. Alain also serves on the board of Yoga Behind Bars, an organization that shares yoga and meditation with incarcerated people in Washington state. They hold a bachelor's in anthropology from Wesleyan University and a master's in social work from the University of Washington. They live in Seattle, but will keep their 917 area code forever. Alain, thanks for being here tonight. Our next speaker we have is Evelyn Chow, who uses any pronouns is an abolitionist, organizer, writer, and sociologist based in Seattle on Coast Salish lands. They currently work as the Economic Justice Manager at Ingersoll Gender Center, one of the nation's oldest trans-led and serving organizations. Previously, they worked as an organizer at Real Change, a local nonprofit dedicated to economic and housing justice. Their community organizing work has focused on state and prison abolition, race and gender equity, immigrant rights, queer trans liberation, sex workers' rights, international worker solidarity, and transformative justice. Evelyn, thank you. Our next panelist is Jerred Clouse, who uses the pronouns he, him, his. He joined Roots Young Adult Shelter a little over a year ago as the executive director. Jerred brings with him considerable experience working in homelessness and social services, having worked at Downtown Emergency Services Center, DESC, Real Change News, Catholic Community Services, Friends of Youth, and Ryder. Jerred has a master's degree in public administration from the University of Washington, where he also completed his undergraduate degree. Outside of work, Jerred enjoys traveling with his partner of 18 years, playing guitar, and overly investing in their cat Miles. I do the same with Bella, Jerred. Thanks for being here tonight. Our next panelist is Evana Enabulele, who uses the pronouns they and them. Housing coordinator of Queer the Land. Evana is a core member of Queer the Land, or QTL. Evana leads the housing circle in QTL, nurturing the dreams of queer, trans, Black, Indigenous people of color, also known as QT BIPOC, of building a home and safe community space. Their passion is not only working on unique housing strategies, but also finding ways to combat the mental aspect of displacement and gentrification. Evana, thank you for being here tonight. Our next panelist is Erica Limón, uses the pronouns she, her, hers. Currently an associate director with YouthCare, a local Seattle nonprofit providing services to homeless young people. Erica specifically oversees YouthCare's young adult transitional living programs, one of which being ISIS Ravenna House, a young adult transitional living program for LGBTQIA plus identified young folks. Erica knows that when young people have equitable access to services and support systems, that young people can grow and allow their brilliance to shine. Erica believes that it takes providers being brave in the face of systemic oppression to push the needle further and redesign systems and program models so that young people are valued for who they are and have every opportunity to succeed. Erica is a Mexican-American Seattle transplant from Southern California. Erica graduated from Utah State University, where she earned her bachelor degree in sociology. She comes into social services work from a peer perspective, having navigated foster care, homelessness, nonprofit systems, and becoming a Children's Defense Fund Beat the Odds recipient. Erica directed all that she learned as a recipient of services to mold programs to better meet the need of young people. Okay, and that is our team of speakers that we have tonight answering some very important questions. So thank you for all making time to be here. And are we ready to get started? Okay, so we'll go ahead and start with the first question. This is for Erica. Erica, how could your organization, or how does your organization serve the LGBTQIA plus community members who are experiencing homelessness?
Yeah, so YouthCare works to end youth homelessness and ensure that young people are valued for who they are and empowered to achieve their full potential. YouthCare was founded in 1974 and YouthCare provides the first LGBTQIA specific housing for young adults on the West Coast. YouthCare really dives deep and builds partnerships with LGBTQIA community partners. We tailor services to better meet the needs of young folks identifying as LGBTQIA. We like to hire folks reflective of the populations in which we serve, because we know that when young people have the ability to see themselves in providers and the people that are, supporting them and navigating through their journey, that they have the ability to really build and develop really deep connections, and that's imperative to a young person's success. And here at YouthCare, we, really hit the nail on the head of being able to do that for our LGBTQIA specific population. Young people frequently tell me, all of the spaces that they have access within YouthCare, that they have always felt seen. They've always felt that they have the ability to thrive and navigate their identity, and that their identity and the navigation through it is celebrated here at YouthCare.
Erica, thank you. Our next question is for Evelyn and Alain. What do you believe are the greatest causes of homelessness in the populations that you serve? What factors do you find uniquely affect LGBTQIA plus community members? We can start first with Evelyn.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here. Thank you all for tuning in. Yeah, this is an important question. I think there's like a series of systemic barriers that trans people face, as well as a lack of access to like key resources that keep trans people housed, right? We know that trans workers report unemployment at much higher rates, sometimes twice or three times the higher rate, depending on ethnicity, disability, et cetera, of the general population. I know that in a 2013 survey from the LGBTQ National Task Force, there was a 14% unemployment rate of trans workers versus the 7% of the general population that they surveyed. But at the same time, if we look here in Seattle specifically as well, when trans people specifically go to seek housing, they're told higher rates of unavailabilities. And you can read about this in the Seattle Office of Civil Rights report from 2017 as well. So there's again, a system and a series of barriers that intentionally make it harder for trans people to acquire housing. And especially if we look in Seattle, the way that the system is set up is so that the system invests in shelters as the sort of quote unquote like on-ramp to receiving a lot of direct services. And we know as well that, trans people don't have equitable access to shelters. So for example, in Ingersoll, we stepped into doing work with Angelines through a partnership with the city because we understand that, we want to interrupt the harm and the inception point through which the harm was, could be attempted to address were in shelters, So one of the work that we're trying to do right now is creating, for lack of a better word, like a compilation of resources that make shelter conditions more trans competent, while also keeping in mind, obviously, that if we're looking at the bigger picture, shelters aren't really safe for anyone. I could go on and on about this question, but the last thing I think I'll bring up as well is referral loops within the shelter system. So there's a lot of ways in which people in Seattle and throughout the U.S. Are not competent in serving, trans people, which is the unfortunate reality. So trans people will often get sent from one city agency to another office to another nonprofit org, all of whom try to just punt the ball to the next office. And, I think there's, in that sort of combination of all the different ways that barriers are set up for trans people, is, why we see such a high rate of homelessness amongst the populations that we serve at Ingersoll.
Evelyn, thank you. And the same question for Alain.
Yeah. And yeah, echo Evelyn. Thanks everyone for being here. Yeah, great to be here. I am very nervous, but I hope that I can follow up Evelyn's great response with a good one of my own. So I really want to echo what they said about homelessness being a systemic issue. Homelessness is a systemic problem, not an individual one. Like, people are homeless because there is literally not enough affordable housing. period. Which is not to say that homelessness is only a class issue. I think homelessness is often seen that way, you know, like, oh, you're only homeless because you can't afford a home. But studies have actually shown that homelessness disproportionately impacts BIPOC and LGBTQIA plus folks, even when controlling for socioeconomic status. So, you know, there's something going on there other than class. At DESC, we work with a specific subgroup of the homeless population. We work with those who experience chronic homelessness. So the majority of people who experience homelessness experience one-off instances or short-term episodes of homelessness, lasting typically under a year or so. In contrast, those who are chronically homeless are those who experience long-term homelessness, so being homeless for over a year, or multiple instances of homelessness over a short period of time. So for example, you know, being homeless for 2 weeks and then housed for a month and then homeless for 2 months and then housed for 3 months and homeless for 4 months, so on and so forth. In King County, 10% of the non-chronically homeless population identify as LGBTQ. In comparison to that, 18% of the chronically homeless population identify as LGBTQ. So not only do folks in our community experience higher rates of homelessness, they are also much more likely to experience more severe forms of it. And on top of that, 27% of unaccompanied homeless youth and young adults in King County identify as LGBTQ. This number is actually on the lower end. A national study shows that up to 40% of homeless youth identify as LGBTQ. The reason for these high numbers are, unfortunately, what you might expect. Youth are often kicked out or run away due to a lack of acceptance at home. I think other panelists might be able to speak more to this, but you know, unsurprisingly, those who experience youth homelessness are at much greater risk of experiencing homelessness as adults, which goes back to that statistic I just mentioned about 18% of the chronically homeless population identifying as LGBTQ. And although LGBTQIA folks experience similar risk factors as other vulnerable and marginalized populations, such as, you know, increased levels of trauma, violence, harassment, all of that fun stuff, I think one unique factor is the visible presentation of self. And what I mean by that is, so I'm pretty visibly Asian, but few people clock me as queer or non-binary. I think that presenting to the world as who you are and being rejected for it is a soul-crushing devastation. That rejection stays with you. It makes it that much harder to trust people. And despite this whole pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps narrative, a strong protective factor against homelessness is having a strong social network, which is really difficult to achieve if you can't trust people. However, because I don't want to end on such a bummer note, I also want to add that as hard as it is to be rejected for who you are, I think that this speaks to the amount of strength and resiliency people in our community have to live as who they are, regardless of the cost. And I think that really speaks to the unique power of the queer community. You know, like, yeah, we could stay in that closet because, hey, at least we have a closet in a room, in a building with a roof over ourselves. But for a lot of us, that's not enough. We are oriented to more than just survival. It's not enough to make it through the day. We need to thrive. We take the risk of being visibly ourselves because that possibility of thriving is worth everything. And I think that that's what our community brings to society as a whole. And that's why I really love working with all of our LGBTQ participants, is that reminder of how much thriving is worth.
All right, and definitely a positive note to end, Alain. Thank you. Alain and Evelyn, great answers. And I know, Evana, you wanted to answer this as well.
Yeah, I just, saw. It was just like, well, Queer the Land, you know, we just serve Black and POC cutie BIPOC folks, well, just queer and trans people of color. So I was just like, what affects us? And it's literally capitalism and white supremacy. And so, yeah, and gentrification, like we're a housing collective, and just about all of us have been impacted, displaced, just displaced because of capitalism and white supremacy income qualifications when it comes to, you know, low income housing or just qualifications in general. And so I just wanted to, I guess, highlight or start the conversation that a lot of it is just white supremacy and capitalism at the end of the day. And yeah, I think all the requests that we get, folks are just looking to, you know, some folks don't have homes, or they're just looking to meet their basic needs. They're being denied. They're being denied for like the smallest things. I think about like when I think about like when I was trying to get out of a domestic violence situation, and the steps that it took, and how I was just like, wow, I'm about to be homeless because I can't get out of my lease, and trying to get into low income housing and all the steps that it takes to get there, and how anti-Black a lot of it is. And so, yeah, just highlighting that white supremacy has a huge role, if not the biggest role, in why cutie BIPOC, but especially Black folks, Black trans women are homeless. And so, yeah.
And Evana, thank you. Personal story. The next question is also for you as well, about how your organization accounts for the unique needs of program participants, particularly those identifying as QT BIPOC, which you were talking about as well.
Yeah, well, Queer the Land, we are a queer and Black and POC collective, so by default, we answer this question. But, you know, we are Black led, and so a lot of us have, you know, we are sex workers, we are, and, you know, people who are immigrants, we are, you know, formerly incarcerated folks. And so we are able to meet the needs of our participants because we have walked the same paths of our participants. So we're not just, you know, some folks on a board, you know, just sitting there telling people what to do. So I think by default, that's amazing. I think a lot of these nonprofit folks just are out of touch, and it's really unfortunate. And then I think, you know, one of the unique ways that we meet our needs is that, you know, too often organizations and foundations have just these barriers when it comes to just giving out financial resources. You know, I think about, like, I was trying to give someone a link to just fill out this form for payment, not realizing that they wanted just a sob story and just all these things. And that's just not something that we ask for. Clearly that, you know, people are hurting. You know, you may make a certain amount of money, but you could be supporting someone who's abroad, because we are people who have families. I'm first generation, and a lot of us are first generation. My sister lives with me, so it just comes with a whole bunch of different barriers. And so we've been able to give away 20,000 in 2020, and that's been really great. We have a thing called we have a fund called the Solidarity Fund. So that's one way that we've been able to meet the needs of our community, especially when it comes to COVID. Black people especially are treated as afterthoughts. And so it's important to make sure that we are taking care of us. And that means just straight up saying, we are just going to support Black and people of color, or, you know, Black and people of color, and turning white people away when honestly, they have the audacity to send us a message, for, you know, requesting support when there's a plethora of resources out there. I also think about our housing program that we have. We just recently bought a 12-bedroom house, and that, in Beacon Hill, that's gentrification. Like, it's just on the verge. It's, if not, about to be gentrified. And that's a huge deal because it's 12 bedrooms. It'll be used to house Black and brown folks. We'll have a healing space. We'll have a place where we'll teach our self-defense class. We'll have a gardening space. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, when you have all your needs met when it comes to housing, you're able to focus on other things. You're able to get a job. We have no mortgage. And so folks will just have a place to rest their head. And that's something that I could have used, 4 years ago. Another program that we have is BASE, which is Building Autonomy and Safety for Everyone. Black trans women are just, I believe the statistic is just over half of, taking account for the folks who are being attacked when it comes to, LGBTQ violence. And so it's about just community care, self-defense, and just defending our bodies. And so, it's offered free or low cost. And so that's something that we offer as well. And lastly, I think about COVID and when it started and how we were able to support our community. I want to reiterate that Black trans women and Black people and people of color are treated as afterthoughts. And so, as you can see with the government and our previous and current administration, we are not getting our needs met. And so we literally have to sit there and create our own economy. And so, we were able to just give folks masks. We were able to issue financial funds. We were able to issue emergency supplies. We knew that it was coming and we were prepared. And now we have a partnership with King County. So those are a few of the things that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Evana. And a lot of things that you do, especially being able to do it during the pandemic, which is something that we're seeing that you guys were still able to thrive as an organization and help those who are in need. So Evana, thank you. We also have that same question for Evelyn.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Evana, for setting, the tone basically for, how organizations can and should show up for our communities. So, Ingersoll is a nonprofit. I would like to start with that. And as a nonprofit, there are always going to be constraints as to what, you can do within the confines of the nonprofit industrial complex. Something that Evana had already brought up is grants, right? And restrictions around grants, barriers around grants, even getting people to, try and print a form, sign it, and then fax it or email it back to us. That assumes a lot, right, about someone's ability or access to internet, to, a phone, a computer, et cetera. And so, I do want to say that, within Ingersoll, we are aware of the lack of capacity that we can provide resources for folks. And, with that being said, I think it's also important to note that Ingersoll serves people who identify as trans and gender nonconforming only. And we're also staffed only by people who identify as trans and gender nonconforming. The majority of our staff are BIPOC as well. And we serve a majority of BIPOC, trans, and low-income peoples. And so, Ingersoll as an org by and for trans people, we provide direct services for people, which is one of the teams that we have. And we also, at the same time, engage in policy and advocacy work, which is the team that I'm on as the economic justice manager. But one of the most important things that I think an organization can do, to serve and provide resources for queer and trans people, BIPOC trans people, is, community building, right? I think isolation, because of white supremacy, because of capitalism, is one of the biggest reasons we know it's so hard to get folks housed. Not to say like notwithstanding other resources to get to folks. And so, direct support is really important. I just mentioned like the direct service team that we have at Ingersoll. We provide community financial assistance for community members in crisis. It's a stipend that's usually about $300, and folks can reapply throughout the months. And we're still working on getting that started up right now. But it's also important to have like job directories, housing directories, right? Like, employers who are like hiring trans people, housing that, is accessible for trans people. And we are, continuously developing internal databases around this. And if, folks are interested, you can view the job board that we have on the Ingersoll website. It's for like community building, right? I think it's been really hard. I'm sure everyone can relate within COVID to keep in touch with people, especially, people who we've provided direct services with. But something that we previously, or Ingersoll previously did, was holding like job fairs, bringing together area employers that have like inclusive, trans inclusive policies, putting together community workshops, right, to help build skills needed to navigate employment, housing, financial systems, as well as the weekly support group that Ingersoll has. It's one of the longest, if not the longest, support group for and led by trans people in the US, I believe. It's been going on since 1977. Haven't missed a Wednesday night. And those you can sign up on the Ingersoll website as well. And last but not least, right, we have to be working on changing the systems that make it so difficult for queer and trans people to exist in the first place. I know that, in the policy and advocacy team, we're working right now on a bill, the Senate bill, to get more trans inclusive healthcare, and that's going really well. We're working with partner orgs on that. And so I think I just kind of threw a lot of things out there. I think overall, one of the ways to really care for queer and trans communities is providing a holistic care, right? Like something that Evana had already brought up. I know that Ingersoll provides like multiple services for trans people, helping people navigate or find doctors that, are good with affirmative health care. But also, it's important to be able to connect our community members to, for example, like the tenants union, to learn more about their rights and to build more self-empowerment within the queer and trans communities. It's important to get people connected to relationship skills classes, so people can learn the skills to maybe talk to their housemates around boundaries, right? Like these are skills that for a lot of people growing up in more tumultuous or, traumatic households are really important for us to be able to just be in relationship with each other. And, helping folks with getting their other needs met. We help folks with getting their ID documents, which has been a huge impediment towards getting people housing, right? And we know that right now, especially with Department of Licensing having been down and the offices being on limited or closed hours because of COVID, it's been extremely hard. And then, I think, yes, that was a lot to answer. Sorry if I'm going over the time. I think I'll just end with, mutual aid is one of the biggest ways in which our communities being queer and trans communities have always like taken care of each other, because we know that the system that exists don't serve us. And so we have to build our community power to serve each other. I think there's only so much of mutual aid that people are able to do within a nonprofit complex. And so I just want to, be super upfront about that and encourage people, who are looking into supporting nonprofits to also look into supporting community-based organizations like Queer the Land and the Trans Women of Color Solidarity Network and COVID-19 Mutual Aid.
Evelyn, thank you. And something that you've touched upon and we've touched upon all night is the pandemic, how it's a shift in services, or even tonight, a demonstration of how we are going virtual, something that we are doing during the time of a pandemic. So this is definitely having an impact on all organizations right now. The next question is to Alain and Evana, and it's about how your services and protocols have evolved as a result of the pandemic. And we can start with Alain.
Oh boy. So unsurprisingly, this pandemic has been extremely challenging for both staff and participants. When the pandemic first started, we initially had to cut back on a lot of our services. We've gotten a lot better since, in the past year, about finding a balance between providing services while keeping each other safe, but it's still really difficult. We're providing the same type of support on a big picture level, but there are also everyday adjustments that make it that much harder to build and maintain a meaningful connection. It's really awkward to build close relationships when we have to stay 6 feet apart. Our agency vehicles aren't equipped with plexiglass, so we can't transport people to medical appointments anymore. We used to have clients come by our office all the time, just to say hi, but we can't welcome people in our space the way we used to. And staff retention has been a major issue, not just in the sense of, oh, nobody wants to be working directly with people during a pandemic, but a lot of people have left, not because they don't want to do the work anymore, but because they want to move out of Seattle to be closer to their families. And I don't begrudge them that at all, but that turnover has been really challenging for our participants. For many of them, their service provider was a major source of social support. It's hard to lose that, especially when you're losing other types of social support as well. Like, we have a Native client who is really struggling with not being able to participate in his drumming circles. And we have a deaf client who isn't able to engage with her peers because she's houseless and doesn't have internet access. Just overall, the pandemic has been really destabilizing. Think about how destabilizing the pandemic has been for you, and then add all of the other traumas that our participants are experiencing on top of it, like homelessness and chronic severe mental health symptoms. People need stability in order to heal, and this pandemic is the opposite of a healing environment. But that said, I think there are some silver linings as well. For example, many of our participants have physical disabilities or have mental health symptoms that make it difficult to leave their spaces. And the recent expansion of telehealth services means that these folks are now accessing healthcare in a way they weren't able to previously. And something I'm really excited about is DESC, which had previously operated the largest congregate homeless shelter in Washington, is now moving away from congregate shelters to individual units, like putting people up at the Red Lion Motel. And the success that clients have found there just really cannot be understated. So many of them are stabilizing in ways that we would not have seen otherwise, which just goes to show how effective giving people housing first is. Like Evana said in their previous answer, when you give people a safe space to rest, they begin to heal and thrive. DESC's new goal is to never go back to congregate shelter programs, and I'm just really stoked for that to happen.
Thank you, Alain. Definitely very good news to see the stability and to see housing provided and to have that open, especially during the pandemic. We've seen a lot of things change, and stability is something that's very important that we're driving home. We do also have the same question. Oh, no, I think we are moving on. I'm sorry, Evana, you're next for this question as well.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Yeah, our programs have changed. wouldn't say dramatically, but I guess, you know, I'm the housing coordinator, but I also have added resource coordinator to my job title, because as soon as the pandemic hit, it just changed our collective as a whole. We started doing a bunch of work around mutual aid, and also literally just writing grants specifically to just give it all back, literally. And I think, so yeah, I think it made us like have to pivot. So we started doing a whole bunch of like food dispersal, partnering with folks like COVID-19 Mutual Aid, and also just deciding to make sure that we're building partnerships with other folks who don't have fiscal sponsorship, because it is that is like a whole different thing. So we can, so sorry, I'm rambling, but I would say that we've started to beef up our partnerships and find ways to grow our own food, because like I've said in question 3, the government doesn't care about us, and we have to take care of us. We've also just tried to find ways to employ our collective and pay them well. So for example, we partnered with the Central Co-op, and we were able to have folks, you know, grocery shop for themselves. We got a tab, we gave them a check, and then they were able to, Central Co-op a check, and then they were able to, our community members were able to either, you know, have the agency to like get all those delicious things, you know, Wagyu steak if they want to, and you know, shop for themselves, or, you know, if they didn't want to, we were able to just shop for them. And we were also able to employ like the folks who needed, folks who wanted to drive. So, and then we have like a partnership with King County with the Safeway vouchers, like issuing those. And so I think with all those partnerships and all those types of things, we were able to move like $200,000. And so that felt really good to be able to move that amount of money for honestly just queer and Black folks. And that made us feel really powerful, because our lane of work is not really mutual aid, although housing is mutual aid in itself, but we're not, you know, we're not on the ground like, you know, out here like COVID-19 Mutual Aid is. You know, they are out there holding community pantries all the time. So it was really nice to go out there and partner with them and do things with them. So I think honestly following other people's lead and chipping in where we can. So I think it's just made us pivot and have to just change with the needs of our community. Clearly our community needs money and food, and yeah, that's what we have to do.
And it's great to see the partnerships that have developed during this time with the pandemic, and to continue the services. So thank you, Evana. Our next question is for Jerred. Jerred, there are many people in the region who argue that people experiencing homelessness are a nuisance and aren't deserving of additional investment. How do you respond to that NIMBY opposition?
Yeah, that's an important question. First, I wanted to say how it's an honor to be on such a talented and informed panel. So thank you for having me. So I think ideally, if someone was talking like this, I think ideally you'd be able to engage in a conversation about how we think about homelessness, and like critically engage in a conversation about how dangerous even the thinking of people being deserving or not deserving, particularly in a country that's based on that has so many systems of oppression built into how we operate. So when you have racism and sexism and homophobia and transphobia and ableism, and you have all these things, when we start talking about who is deserving and undeserving in this country, it's a real dangerous path, because we also know it's just not true. So that would be ideally that you would engage in a conversation like that. However, in my experience, a lot of folks who are arguing NIMBY don't want a deep conversation. So I would suggest a very pragmatic approach. So if someone is unhappy with someone living outside and then being affected by the impacts of someone living outside, the very logical answer is to get that person inside. Like, that is how we solve that problem. And how do we get there? We get there in a very logical way, in the same way we would with any community need that presents itself. It's through community investment. Your community invests in solutions, and that's how we address needs in the community. Now, I think the natural NIMBY argument then is, well, I don't want to pay for it. And the response is, you are already paying for it. You are already paying top dollar right now to not deal with the problem. So when people experiencing homelessness primarily are engaging with police officers or ambulances or emergency rooms or jails or courts or judges, like, these are really, really expensive systems. These emergency response systems, they're really, really expensive. You are paying for them as a citizen, and they do nothing to solve or address the issue. We are paying top dollar to do nothing. And so if someone who is making this argument, I would say, it seems like you're investing a lot of money and you're not happy with the outcome that you are getting. And so may I suggest more effective and cost-effective means to address your concern. So for example, permanent supportive housing is a model. It's one of the most researched models in the nation. And it works with folks who've experienced chronic homelessness. And it has effectiveness rates in like 97%. How many things in this world have effectiveness rates of 97%? It's incredibly effective. It's also been proven to be cheaper to literally house folks than to have them constantly engaging with emergency services. They also demonstrates that people are healthier when they're in permanent supportive housing or investing in affordable housing. We know for a fact that as the cost of living goes up, less people can afford to be indoors. For every $100 that rent goes up, there's an increase of 13% in homelessness. So we know that this is a real solution. We have other interventions like rapid rehousing and diversion. They're relatively cheap interventions that work. And also for someone who's concerned about just free money going around, those programs actually invest money back into the housing market, which you can be conflicted on, but I think some NIMBY folks would be excited about that. I think that the data is on our side. And if people can get past their discrimination towards folks, there are real solutions and real data and real answers if we're only strong enough and smart enough to acknowledge them.
All right. Thank you, Jerred. Our final question for tonight is for Erica and Jerred. What can attendees without the need for extensive resources do to serve the LGBTQIA+ folks experiencing homelessness? And we are going into the Q&A in about 7 minutes. So we will give the floor first to Erica and then to Jerred.
Thank you so much for this question. I think that there's a lot that, folks that are viewing this panel or, just in general can do to really be advocates for young people experiencing homelessness in the LGBTQIA+ community. And one of the top things that, folks can very tangibly do, and that's educate your community, educate your inner circle on the needs of LGBTQIA specific populations, challenge stereotypes, challenge your beliefs, and hold your peers accountable. That's something that's costs zero money, but is so effective. Spaces so often slap rainbow stickers and equal stickers on the outside of their businesses. And that sends the message to, young LGBTQIA folks that, hey, you know what, I might not get assaulted here, but I'm probably going to have to educate this person of, no, I use she, her pronouns, or no, I use they, them pronouns, or no, I use he, him pronouns, or no, I use ze, their pronouns. It's not enough to just do it for appearances. It's really being able to dive deep and be uncomfortable and challenge those stereotypes in a very non-white way. You know, we have this idea that our LGBTQ populations are white and that young people who are LGBTQIA and experiencing homelessness are white, and they're not. You know, and so being able to lean into that discomfort and really challenge yourself and your inner circle and hold folks accountable, you know, partner with a local organization, advocate for specific LGBTQIA specific resources. Like, it's as simple as using proper pronouns or asking folks, you know, which pronouns do you feel most comfortable with? Like, how do you see yourself and how can I support that? It's also, you know, cis people have to stick up and stand up and lead that conversation, and not be afraid of it or lean into their discomfort. You know, validating experiences of young people experiencing homelessness. It's as simple as you know, that sounds really tough, and it costs you nothing. You know, participate in LGBTQ events and activities that are not pride related. You know, being able to dive deep and volunteer and learn an unwhitewashed history of LGBTQ history, and challenge the Eurocentric notion of that history and culture. You know, support LGBTQ artists and businesses and authors, and don't box people into specific identities. You know, we have all of this intersection, and how do we validate that? I think that those are all very tangible ways to be able to support young people experiencing homelessness that costs $0.
Erica, thank you. Great recommendations for ways that everyone can get involved and support. We do have the next question. We want to add in Jerred, and then we will also have the same question for Alain after.
Well, Erica really covered the bases on that. That was an exceptional answer. I think, I think that's really it. Try to be informed and try to spread the message. I think for something that's really frustrating as someone who works in the field of homelessness is most of what I do is focused on the impacts of homelessness and not changing the things that cause homelessness. And so how that changes is by changing how people think and challenging these common narratives that blame people for homelessness and not identifying it as a systemic problem. And like also just so like when you hear a narrative where like about it being an individual problem, challenge it, and also know some of the buzzwords that politicians are going to throw around. Like housing first is good. Housing first works. Harm reduction saves lives. I think that's and then the last thing I could think of is I think when we're talking about people experiencing homelessness, there's a huge lack of empathy. I think the assumption is when people see someone experiencing homelessness, they like the question I've gotten many times, like, do people choose to be homeless? And the answer is just like, no. Like, unless you have sat in your home at times and wondered, should I just leave? Like, we somehow think that people experiencing homelessness are so different from us, and that's how it happened. And that's actually just a lack of empathy. So when you see someone experiencing something that you can't relate to, it's not something wrong with them. It's that we do not understand what they have been through or our inability to empathize with how they got there. And keep that base. Like, we're all equally human when it comes to this, and keep that as your base when you're talking about folks who are experiencing homelessness.
Very good reminder, Jerred. Yes. Empathy, very important at all times. Thank you. And Alain, we want to give you the opportunity as well to answer the question.
Thank you. So I know this question asks about non-extensive, like about things you can do with non-extensive resources, but I'm still going to be that jerk who advocates that all of you donate anyway. Donate what you can to the orgs that really speak to you, whether it's like $5, $10, $20, $30. There are 5 amazing organizations represented at this panel today. Even like small amounts, like even if you do a reoccurring donation of $5 a month, like that's still really meaningful, especially for smaller organizations. I think Evelyn spoke to this earlier very briefly, but donations are really important because those funds are unrestricted, and so organizations can put them to use in ways that we feel are best instead of having to listen to, what are the grant stipulations. So please, 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 if you can donate, any small amount is still really meaningful, especially for smaller organizations. I also really want to encourage folks to engage in and stay, pay attention to local politics. We spend a lot of time focusing on the political theater that is the federal government, but local politics is where change happens. Vote for policies that support our homeless communities, and vote for people who will advocate for, our homeless neighbors. Know who your city council member is. Learn who your state representative and who your state senator is. Find out what committees they sit on. Call and email them. Ask that they support homelessness policies or thank them for doing so. Say yes to affordable housing, especially when it's in your neighborhood. Especially when it's in your neighborhood. Say yes to policies that expand mental health and social services. I think, speak up at city council meetings or at public hearings for bills at the state level. I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that now that everything is remote, you can testify from the comfort of your bed, from your couch. You can testify in your PJs. It's super easy. It will cost you nothing, and it would really help. And I also strongly recommend that you get your news from sources that approach issues with the homeless community in mind. I really like Real Change and Public Cola for that. I think there are lots of really great local news organizations that do a really good job of approaching issues, intersectional issues from a homeless perspective. Yeah, thank you.
Alain, thank you. And thank you for also reminding us that we do have links if anyone wants to donate to our 5 amazing organizations tonight. Click on the booths on the left-hand menu so you can donate to this important cause. And thank you to all our speakers. We are now going to move on to our next section. We have a Q&A section. So audience members, you are allowed to ask questions, and speakers, if you feel you want to answer, you could put your hand up, or we can all everyone can take turns. So the first question is, what do you believe is the best way for nonprofits to collaborate with amazing organizations like the ones here tonight and create meaningful partnerships to support community? Whoever wants to put their hand up or chime in. Oh, Erica.
Yeah, I think one of the very tangible ways that nonprofits can collaborate with other nonprofits, other organizations is, very simply is reach out, but also reach out with a goal in mind. What is it that I very tangibly want to bring to this table? What is our outcomes going to be? How do we envision those together? How do we marry those? And then how do we execute those so that we can, deliver the very best services to young people without missing a beat? It's very simple as just reaching out to the organization theirself. I facilitate multiple different partnerships. And I'm always looking for different partnerships to better support our young people, specifically if it's, going to be something that's going to give them healing-centered engagement, identity work, things like that. And then just always being able to have an idea of where do we want this to go? And how do we get there?
It's also open to any of the other speakers. Evelyn?
Yeah. So if I'm hearing correctly, I think, so the question was, what do you believe is the best way for nonprofits to collaborate with quote unquote amazing orgs like ours, creating meaningful partnerships? I think I'm assuming that the question is referring to like community-based organizations and not other nonprofits. And if that's the case, I do have a response to that. And if it's not, we can scrap my response. But, I think one of the biggest patterns that I've seen with like nonprofits trying to work with community-based organizations, especially ones that I'm a part of as well, is like co-optation of the community org's work. I think that happens really often, right? Like they come in, they're like, here, we have all this money, like how do we support, they get their photo op, they get their op-ed, they get, whatever they get out of that. And then, maybe the relationship stays, but we all know that, turnover and like turnover rates in employment at like nonprofits are really high, especially ones that are direct service, especially ones that are like housing related. And then maybe those relationships are lost, right? And so I think I just want to put out there that like, if you are at a nonprofit and you want to collaborate with a community-based organization to actually treat that relationship like genuinely, I think is really important. Something that also helps is just like, having your org hire from the communities that you want to serve, which I feel like should be a given, but really isn't in a lot of the ways that we've seen Seattle nonprofits and many nonprofits function. Like hire from these communities, pay them well, pay us well, provide good benefits, and yeah, just approach it with sincerity. That's like the quick response that I have to that question.
And I can move on to the next question unless anyone wants to answer this one as well. Okay. Oh, yes, Evana.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I didn't know if you could see looking at the chat. I just want to piggyback off of Evelyn because we're also in some of the same, well, we're friends, but we're also in some of the same groups as well. But I'm in a community-based organization, and I think everything they said, but if folks can genuinely get to know the organization that they're going to talk about, it is kind of insulting to be approached, by what someone has read, or just, quickly just approaching someone and you don't even know what someone is about or their principles. I think about how like Where the Land is a Black and POC organization, and then the things that people approach us with, I'm just like, then you must not really know who you're talking to. So really getting to know the community, the people, and then approaching them, or you can collaborate quietly. There's people who literally want to donate things and then want to talk about it. And if you really want to make meaningful change, then, that you did it. That you did it. So why does everybody else have to know that you did it? That's the feeling that I'm feeling after we had purchased this house, people wanting to donate things, and just like you can donate it quietly, but I'm not going to plaster your name somewhere just so you can feel good about yourself. So if people want to do and collaborate with folks, think about that, think about how y'all are talking about giving money to people and how, people post it on Facebook. Think about that and apply it to this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Evana. Very important. That's true. We can, our next question, have any of your organizations partnered with local libraries or library systems? And if so, what did it look like? Jerred.
So I have a weird answer because most of my answers are about previously in my work experience, not currently. So, I worked at Real Change, and we had a collaboration with a library where, I don't know the current status of the project, but they would come in and they kept a small library at Real Change where folks could come and check out books. And we also got an agreement where their their ID where they could sell the newspaper, that would count as their ID, so they could check out books at the library. I'm sorry, Alain, to talk about your turf. DESC has had case management that works primarily out of the downtown library, which is just really successful. And also the University District Library is active in a service provider alliance that operates in the University District. So I've definitely experienced a lot of great collaborations with local libraries.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning the DESC collaboration. I'm not super familiar with the program, but I think unfortunately because of the pandemic, I think that program might have shut down. I'm hopeful that we can get it to start back up once the pandemic is less of an issue. But yeah, that is a great question though.
All right, thank you. So we can move on to question 3, if everyone's okay with that. How might non-governmental organizations share their resources and services to local organizations so that they can be better equipped with resources to support people who need them?
You can donate money.
That's true. Again, the tab on the left-hand side, donate at any time. Feel free. And afterwards, we will have links. There will be ways to get in touch with the organizations as well. So that's also an opportunity. And they can support there as well. Yes, Evana.
Yeah, money is always great because it's unrestricted. Just want to reiterate that. Yeah. But I also think like resources and your body, you know, to pull up weeds out of a garden, or to just like the resources that you have. Maybe someone like has a contractor, or that is more valuable because then we could save those unrestricted funds for, you know, staffing to employ our community members. I didn't think about the fact that, you know, money would dwindle so quickly. And so the fact that folks could offer their plumbing services for free, or they could offer furniture or dishes, and the fact that you could save and, you know, put that somewhere else, or just, yeah, so things like that, offering services, offering maybe mental health services for free, or just stipends, just offering things for free or at a low cost. But yeah, just offering things, like tangible things that people can hold and have and experience.
Yeah, that's a great reminder, Evana. We're seeing a lot of partnerships. That's what we're talking about, and donating services, or if someone has the ability to donate time, or even helping to, you know, pick weeds like you mentioned, or to, you know, go out and volunteer their time. That is also something that can be very helpful right now. Any of the other speakers want to answer? Yes, Evelyn.
Yeah, I just want to, you know, reemphasize everything that Evana said. I think, like, you know, one of the most important practices that I've seen in, you know, transformative justice work, restorative justice work, is like the practice of pod building. It's a concept that came to be by the Bay Area Transformative Justice Center, created by Mia Mingus, who's also a disabled BIPOC person. And, you know, I think pod building is basically essentially what Evana was just, you know, describing, right? Of like, you at your organization, like, probably have connections to, like, I don't know, maybe like a dozen coworkers, you know, like, what resources do your coworkers have access to? You know, you talk to them on a regular basis. You know, what resources do your coworkers' families have access to? Like, how can you get them to share, you know, things like that? And, you know, yeah, maybe you have a plumber in your network, or in your pod, quote unquote, or, you know, you have access to people who like have medical knowledge, you know, like things that you can like really pass down. And I think we saw the importance of that, you know, spring up in this past summer with the protests, right? Like, people we're offering like, you know, not just money, but like really like tangible services, resources to people on the ground and people doing, you know, the quote unquote invisible work, right? And so I think that's really important. If, you know, you're a part of an NGO, like, you know, like do what you can, I guess, with those institutional resources and like, you know, leveraging what you have there. But like, you know, you are also like, you know, a person within just like a sphere of people in a community that can, you know, help advance causes and do the work to advance those causes.
Evelyn, thank you. Our next question is, many people cite substance abuse as a primary cause of homelessness. How accurate do you think these allegations are when considering causes of homelessness or housing insecurity for LGBTQIA+ community members? Eric?
I think that substance abuse is a symptom of homelessness, but is not the causation of homelessness. Homelessness is a multifaceted issue that is, it stems from systemic oppression and systemic downsides. You know, like right now, us as services, we are providing services to young people who have faced housing instability their entire lives. You know, they come out of the OA, you know, economic downfall. Like they come out of, you know, intergenerational trauma. They come out of so many different things, and substance abuse is just a symptom of homelessness, but is not the cause of it. You know, it's a lack of access to resources, inequity of resources. It is, you know, services being provided with the idea that a young person already knows how to access them without ever thinking or taking a step back of maybe I need to dive a little further. And, you know, to even remotely think that substance abuse is the cause of it is just trying to sweep homelessness under the rug.
Alain?
I 100% agree. I think that substance use is often used as like a red herring or like a scapegoat, or, you know, I don't think that this is the right framing to approach the issue with. You know, I think that, again, like Erica said, like substance use is a symptom of a deeper issue. And I think that you have to address that root cause first. Like people don't just one day like wake up and decide like, you know what, I'm just gonna get addicted to something today. Like there's something deeper going on.
Certainly. Thank you, Alain. Our next question is, what promoted solutions to homelessness? For example, expanding shelter capacity, removing encampments, prioritizing chronic homelessness. Those are some of the examples. Do you see as ineffective for serving LGBTQIA+ community members? Jerred.
I don't know if I'm actually going to answer the question, but I think one thing that I think is lacking in the question is that the real answer to everything is housing. Like people deserve housing, and everything that we do for harm reduction, like shelters, is theoretically it is better to be in a congregate shelter than it is to be outside. But people don't need congregate shelter. People need housing. People need autonomy and privacy and safety, and the space to be their best selves. So I think, yeah, I'm just gonna say that like all the like, that's the real answer, is how do we get people inside into their own living space? That's the real answer, and everything else is just trying to get us there, or a harm reduction to not actually providing the solution.
The next question that we have from an audience member is, what are some specific asks that you've heard from the LGBTQIA community members experiencing homelessness that would improve their circumstances? Erica, and then you can go to Alana.
One of the very tangible asks young people often just promote is that they want to be able to learn how to navigate systems from people who look like them and have navigated those systems, you know, and being able to really develop that community and that communal wellness, and being able to have that support systems outside of the organizations that they are frequenting.
Evana?
Oh yeah. Yeah, what I've heard is can't even get employed. So a job, you know, no one there. God, there's so many things that come to mind because we just get a bunch of emails. So I'd say you can't get employed. No one wants to rent to you. Money, I think, yeah, no one wants to listen to them. I just, you know, not that I didn't realize, because I'm like, dang, no one listens to me sometimes, but like the power of just listening to someone and thoroughly like, wow, dang, you really need some help. But money, you know, money, literally, we're in a capitalist society. And unfortunately, if you have enough coins, then you can pay your way out of just about anything, even if you look like me, you know? So money is what really helps. And that's what we give out a lot of, but clearly it doesn't change people's circumstances, but it's temporary and it helps them temporarily.
We can move to the next question now. Who do you believe are being left out of the conversation when considering the needs for the LGBTQIA plus community members who are experiencing homelessness? Erica?
BIPOC folks. We frequently leave out BIPOC folks who identify as LGBTQIA and experience homelessness, and we wrap around services to meet the needs of our white young folks who are LGBTQIA, and we drop the ball frequently and consistently, and we don't think that treatment needs to be altered to better meet the needs of BIPOC folks accessing our services.
Thank you, Erica. Evana?
I mean, yeah, it's a given that, you know, BIPOC folks, but more specifically Black folks. But I think in Seattle, services on the South End for queer folks is definitely something that we're missing. I don't see it. It's not there. It's not happening. You think about like going to Capitol Hill and how things are advertised, and you know, also just, you know, the panel, all the things, like I can't be politically correct. I just think like it's an interesting question given the city we live in, that you know, sometimes like these things, I'm not trying to insult you, but like these things are clear as day that it's always been Black people, you know, it's just always been Black people. And yeah, you think about our mayor, you think about like the policies, you think about just the racism within the LGBTQ community. Even, yeah, it's insane. It's mind-boggling. So yeah, even in the shelters that I've worked in, I'm just like, dang. So sorry to go off on a tangent. I am just a Black non-binary person who's just like, whew, I'm in a Black POC collective who is actively getting a bunch of messages about folks who are experiencing gentrification while they're in a pandemic, while they're being turned away from like a bunch of nonprofits, or while they're, having to spit out their trauma just to get $300 or $400 or $1,000. And it's just never enough, or having to post all these GoFundMes when I see, a white queer person getting it fulfilled and we can't get our trans Black women fulfilled. So yeah, things like that. Those are my feels, and that's what I see.
Evana, thank you. The next question, what solutions or strategies would you advocate for to prevent homelessness for LGBTQIA+ people?
Yeah, I can talk just like a little bit. I think, and this answer might encompass a lot of the previous questions as well. We in the city and also just in this US, settler colonial state, see the ways in which like they're very tangible investments in making sure that like white able-bodied people, especially men, succeed, right? I think like really tangible ways that you can support like a redirection of that money, right? Again, because like what Evana just said, we do live in a capitalist society. Like, when I think about like Seattle Police Department making overtime by removing encampments, throughout the entire pandemic, even though they like weren't supposed to, but are getting paid like over $100,000, $150,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year, right, to do this type of work. Like, I really have to question, like, it doesn't really matter like who is mayor or like in these, elected officials seats, because we've had a Democratic like government in Seattle, in Washington for a very long time, and still we see these issues persisting. I would encourage folks to invest their energies in solutions and strategies that are outside of our electoral system, because we know that it just does not serve, BIPOC, queer, and trans folks. And yeah, it might be nice for representation, like a nice feel-good moment, but like when it comes down to it, like these systems are literally like investments in making sure that queer and trans BIPOC folks like aren't able to flourish to get what they need. And I mean, I could talk about this for so long, so I'll just cap it off there. But yeah, I would just encourage people to look into ways to, still be quote unquote politically engaged, but understanding that the system is set up and working exactly the way it's supposed to be working, and kind of like kicked into high gear right now under COVID. Yeah.
Evelyn, thank you. We have our last question before about 8:30 is when we'll switch over to the networking part. The last question is, if you could change one thing about the current homeless system in King County for LGBTQ folks, example, access to mental health care, barriers accessing certain services, what would you change? Eric?
I think this is an excellent question, but I don't think it's a just one thing. I think it's an and question. Like, we need to change the mental health care system. Ultimately, like, the mental health care system in Seattle was, in Washington State was, was defunded not too long ago, and then the funds have never caught up to that. And so we have increasingly high levels of mental health needs and not enough providers to be able to provide that need. We have barriers accessing CEA systems, right? Where, it has inadvertently came in and changed our systems overnight, changed our programming overnight. And we have, young people with higher levels of acute needs, and we don't necessarily have the resources to put behind really being able to dive deep with these young people and really being able to provide the very best services. And we don't all have the same idea or definition as we, provide these services of what does this look like? What does Housing First really look like? What does Healing Center and Engagement really look like? How do we drive that? What is, how do we categorize homelessness, and what does that really look like? So I think it's a multiple answer. It's not just one.
And Jerred?
I completely agree with Erica. It's not just the one thing. I think we just need more services, period. But the fact that it's a limited resource and we have to decide who is most deserving is problematic in itself and impossible. And it really is dehumanizing when people have to try to prove that they are deserving. And that is when we're rationing services, that is the position we're putting people in. And it's just not a healthy way to get needs met. So.
And would anyone else want to add to that, or we can wrap up this part of the panel for the Q&A with the audience members. So thank you for all the audience members who submitted questions, and thank you to our panelists who were able to just share their experiences and really dive in as much as we could. I understand that a lot of us could probably continue on to this topic, which is why there will be ways to contact your organization, donate to your organization, and support as well. So as we move forward, we are going to announce the networking section. So everyone will be able to go into different networking one-on-one groups, from what I understand. So that is where we are going to go right now. But again, thank you to the speakers. Thank you to everyone who joined us virtually. Hopefully in the future, this will be in person. There's no timeline for when that'll happen, but for now, these speaker series will take place virtually, and we will continue very important discussions that we need to have. So thank you, everyone.